The 2022 MLR Collegiate Draft is all wrapped up, and we now know where the league's newest players will be heading, but the question still remains, who among them will become fantasy rugby stars? We bring a special guest on the show to help us find out. The Fantasy Ruckers show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 32 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thanks so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, to our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. That's right, we're still trying to do it. We're making waves, and it was a busy week in the MLR. Quite a few important things going on. Enough for us to at least have to put out 2 episodes this week. So the Fantasy Ruckers fans have a lot to look forward to. A lot of fantasy rugby content to digest and to take part in that. Matt, you're making a return here. Weren't here last episode, but you're back here to break down the 2022 MLR Collegiate Draft.
You know, I saw too many of my boys get drafted early yesterday, so I just had to, jump on, make an appearance, and start shouting them out one by one. But hey, I come back, next Tuesday. Vandy comes back. We're coming back slowly in numbers, and then we'll be at full strength. But I hear today, replacing Vandy, we've got a special guest today. That's what I hear.
We do have a special guest, and yes, we do have a draft breakdown. We're going to find out what that 2022 MLR Collegiate Draft really means for the world of fantasy rugby. Who are those players that are going to be making an impact next season? The guys that Matt and Vandy and all of our other league members are going to be trying to scope out for, to try to get and try to make an impact in pushing them up the rankings, maybe help you, Matt, make it into the playoffs this year. But yeah, Vandy will be back next week to talk more about it. And yeah, we do have a special guest on the show to join us here to help us break down these players and really get into the nitty gritty of the 2022 draft. He's one of our league members, and he knows a lot about these young players that are coming through. We got to bring on John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning. Woo! John, thank you so much for joining us, man. We know that you've been absolutely loving all of the stuff that is the MLR Collegiate Draft this past week.
Oh, absolutely. And guys, thanks for having me on. And right off the bat, you cannot replace a guy like Devin Vanderpool. I mean, come on, the guy's a legend. I almost wore my Colorado Avalanche jersey just for him.
Oh man, he would have.
It would have been like he was here. So
yeah, exactly. That guy hasn't stopped talking since that team has won the Stanley Cup. But yeah, well, it's all right. We can take a little break from that guy. But yeah, he will be back. Before we get into it, though, I gotta mention to all the people, we appreciate all the support when it comes to fantasy rugby, and we continue our trying to spread this thing. And the best way to do that is by following us at the Fantasy Ruckers on social media, Twitter, Instagram. You'll find out there first. It's how John found out about our league, how we first found out about fantasy rugby. That's where you're gonna find out if you'll be able to join a league, all the great fantasy rugby content that we've been going. It's really helped, I think, the off-season lulls of this MLR year. It's helped the rugby content going. So definitely appreciate all your guys' support. If you want to talk more about it, we got the Discord channel down below too. You can join that. It's been great. A lot of people having conversations there, especially with the draft. And yeah, we absolutely love your support. Hit the like, subscribe button as well. But guys, let's hop right into it. And the best way to do that is to start off with our Ask TFR show question, because we have it every single week. And of course, this week it's going to be something draft related. And knowing that obviously Matt is in our league, and of course, Fitzy, you are also in our league, this is a good question to kind of figure out here what the strategy going forward is with some of these guys that we saw selected in this collegiate draft. So we're opening up with a pretty straightforward question here, guys, is when you're looking at these guys, now that you know the guys that have been drafted and where they're going, what are you looking for in these certain players that are going to pop to you in terms of guys that you would consider drafting in this upcoming 2023 fantasy MLR season? Is there anything particular that you guys are looking for, especially now that you know where these guys are going? Fitzy, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I'm looking for is I'm looking for a name that my boy Matty can make a fun pun out of. I'm stocking my roster full of guys that just got wacky names that Matty can roll with.
Hey, just look for any of the bands and the vers and the whatever other South African name you can think of. I'm sure I can make something of it.
Well, Matt, I got one for you. We'll drop later in the show, and hopefully I don't mess it up because I know you're the king of these. But Ron, to answer your question for real, I think what we found out here is, one, it was a wild draft, right? There were some surprises, I thought. But if you're looking for rookies, right, college drafted players to make a mark on your team and in fantasy, I think it's all situational, right? It's what teams that we know of public information where guys have left, right? Either they're retired or they're going back to Australia or New Zealand or wherever else, right? And some of these MLR clubs are going to have holes to fill. And then we also, I think, right, if you're a savvy person, we've got some guys in here who can really crunch the numbers. It's, the guys who were in the final really knew what they were doing. But you got to look at, okay, what positions score really well? And then look back historically and try and figure out, over the last 2 years, what rookies have performed well, right? And I think there are some players, some rookies, and we can go dive over this in a little bit. There are some rookies who have got in the top 40. But I think this year, is there going to be someone like a Tavete Lepetti, who I believe was in our top 30 for score? And I know I have that number here somewhere.
Yeah, I could pull that up.
But yeah, you got to look that up. We'll get those numbers. Yeah, he was number 44 on the scoring list, right?
Yeah,
so
number 44. I think it's 46.9 total fantasy points.
Yeah, are we going to have someone who's going to be a starter and pop all year long, or is it going to be more depth, waiver wire? Hey, I need to fill a hole here, and that's really how championship teams are formed. Not that Maddie would have anything to know about that.
I was waiting for that subtle shot.
Yeah, you're talking about the two guys in the finals. I was just thinking, which final?
I wasn't in there.
There's two pretty big finals that were going on. The toilet bowl final. Can't forget about that bad boy. We had two pretty stellar managers in that one too.
No, I got to get my shots in now because your Canadian boys popped at the draft, man. And for my team, Old Glory DC, there was a few that really caught my eyes. So I'm looking forward to chatting about that.
Hey, you can just enjoy the boys, from the birds. So right. Yeah, that's definitely good for the DC boys and definitely good for the UBC club. But I guess for my answer to this question is, and I think Fitzy, you hit it right on the nail of the head, right? Like it's really, who has performed in the past, what rookies have been able to perform in the past. But for me, I mean, the big thing is going to be opportunity. Who is going to get the actual opportunity to play? Guys who are going to Dallas, maybe they have a greater opportunity to be able to get on the field and get good playing time. Whereas, guys going to New York, guys going to Giltinis, guys going to, the Free Jacks, where they already have a fairly set roster and a talented roster at that. I think it'll be tough for those guys to find a place to be, starters. Because frankly, if I'm not going to draft a rookie unless I know that or I'm pretty confident, because there's no way that we can know with the MLR. But I'm pretty confident that he's going to get playing time and he's going to get, opportunities to actually get on the field. Otherwise, like you said, you can always pick him up in the waiver wire. You can always find these hidden gems once you start seeing the lineups come out. But yeah, that's mainly what I'm looking for a rookie. I mean, talent is great, but opportunity to play and actual playing time is everything.
Yeah, I think I couldn't have said it better myself, guys. I have it here in my notes. All I have is situation. I mean, you could be the most talented player in this entire draft, but to your guys' point, I don't need to keep on saying it, that it really does matter where these guys fall, how much playing time they're going to get, and ultimately how much are they going to be involved in the offense, because that's, at least right now, the way that our league is tailored. It's all about scoring. It's all about tries. So who are going to be the guys that are going to be getting those opportunities? It remains to be seen. So yeah, I think it's just really diving into those spots and positions that people or players are now put in with the respective teams that they were drafted to. Not saying that talent doesn't have anything to do with it. Obviously, you gotta, if it does, it's gonna help, being in those situations and having that next level top tier talent to become that fantasy superstar. But we'll see whether or not that can happen with this draft class. Last question though, before we move on here to a quick news and notes portion, just to get everyone caught up with the latest happenings in the MLR. What round, and this is more of a fun one for you guys, what round for you guys, if you were to take the exact same rules that you guys drafted with last season, same number of teams, same positions and everything, what round are you hitting before you're comfortable taking a rookie? Where you're just like, fourth round, I can't because he's a rookie. I don't want to go that route. What round I can't remember how many total rounds we had. Something like 15, I think, total rounds in our draft. So what threshold is it going to be for you guys as a general rule?
Fitzy, you drafted Tavilo Petty in what, 6th round last year?
I think it was the 6th round last year.
I don't, I'm not as gutsy as you, that's for sure. So I'm going to be saying like those are 13, 14, 15 round throwaway picks because, like I said, you're not going to know. You're not going to know which guy is going to be in the starting lineups until the lineups actually come out, and then that's when you can make a decision. I'm not as gutsy, but then again, I also sucked last year, so maybe I didn't.
it was Tavilo Petty that was the whole read. That's the reason why you did way better than you, Matt. So yeah, what round for you, Fitzy, until you're comfortable? I mean, obviously you did it 6 last year. We're going to be seeing it again next year.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ryan, it's a good question. And Maddie, I mean, like, I think in that situation, he was a guy that I targeted as a rookie who maybe it was a hunch that it was like, hey, this guy's going to be in a good situation. He's going to play. He had already been capped by the Eagles, right? He had played Canada. So it was like, Seattle was probably going to throw this guy in the starting lineup, right? Now, that begs the question, right, are there rookies who are going to pop this year? And I think there's probably a couple that may contribute from a fantasy point of view. This year, the draft was like the year of the prop, right? It was the position that drafted the most. We know, right, based on just 1 year that, props aren't going to score a lot of points here. We've seen a lot of hookers, right? I know that's Maddie's big thing is grabbing those hookers, whoever's going to be the starting hooker for Toronto.
And locks.
Well, now Quatrin's gone. I can just stay with McRogers, so we're all good.
Stay with your boy, right? We know, based on MLR, the line out, they're 5 meters out, that hooker's going to grab some tries off the back there. So something to think about. But I think some of the top players who got drafted this year may not necessarily be strong fantasy performers, right? Like a guy like number 1 overall, Sam Gala is great. He is a good, strong player. Is he going to be a leading fantasy rookie? I don't know, but I do think that in the back line, in the back 3 is where we're more than likely going to see some players have some opportunities. So maybe a guy like Ethan Hager, who Dallas drafted a wing out of Canada. I should be waving a little Canadian flag right now, propping you guys up here, but I think because Maddie, you hit on this earlier, right? Opportunity, right? And situation. I think there's opportunity down there in Dallas to get on the field, and I know they have some good young wingers down there, some promising wingers down there. But hey, you make an impression early in camp, and you can have an opportunity to get out there. So I think some wingers, but
yeah, to that point, Fitz, I was just thinking that you're talking about Tavilo Petty's like his accolades upcoming to the draft, or as a rookie, he came in already being capped with the Eagles. There is no rookie in this class that has that type of history. I think the most, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the most is really just U20
That's
so
what
far.
I saw.
So I mean, when you look at that, the 6th round pick for Lopetti was clearly, an outlier, not an out, but like an exception because he had the resume to say, yeah, this guy can succeed in a men's league, right? This guy can succeed against other professionals. Where you look at these guys and like 6th round doesn't seem like a place to draft any of these guys that haven't really, given us a reason to, really.
Yeah. So will I draft a rookie in the 6th round this year? Probably not. I mean, I think my last pick in the draft was Andrew Coe last year, and he ended up being in the top, right, man? Like my boy there, top 40.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Will I draft a rookie? I might. Maybe I'm just throwing up some smoke just to kind of, for the other league members that are watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think there'll be more depth, and waiver wire pickups and crafty. Hey, maybe I can get 5 or 6 points here, and let's take a flyer on a guy, but we'll see.
For sure. So yeah, just an interesting kind of brain teaser there. Yeah, I think there were some unique players in last year's draft that kind of allowed them to go in the spots that they did. We'll see whether or not there's some additional news that comes out because there's still a long time between the start of the 2023 MLR season, so we can hear a lot of different things.
In classic MLR fashion, we will not know who's going to be playing until one day before the match, right? So really, we're going to be drafting with our eyes closed at this point.
What's going on with Austin and LA, right? Like,
right.
What's going on?
Exactly.
That's all. You don't want to get me going there. So, so we should move on pretty quick.
Yeah. So we'll
there was like, hey, there was talk of an expansion team, right? That could have been an opportunity for players to pop. Like, I don't think an expansion team's going to happen this year, right? Like Chicago, St. Louis was rumored. Maybe that's, in the following year, but those are opportunities for rookies for potentially next year. Like, so many questions swirling around the league. And again,
you bring that up, and sorry, Ryan, to keep jumping in, but I just wanted to I was just looking.
You're taking this.
There's a lot to talk. There's a lot to talk about, man. It might be the off season, but we've got a whole bunch to talk about.
I think we need to add a point of clarification here for everybody.
For so long.
There we go. We need to add a little point of clarification here that rookie versus drafted or draft class, right? Like rookie, yes, Andrew Coe, yes, Tavit Lopetti were rookies. Would I have drafted Andrew Coe way earlier? And my rookie threshold for guys like him is going to be, 5th round, 4th round, 6th round. Yes, like I will draft rookies in that caliber. Technically, if Nehe Milner-Skudder started at the start of the season, he would have also been a rookie, right?
Right.
So when we think about that, like those rookies, you can they have some resume to look at. But when you look at the draft class guys, it's a whole different story. Like just looking at draft class guys, I'm going to have a hard time even drafting one of them. To be honest.
So now, I guess the good distinction will be free agent rookies and I guess drafted rookies. That would be a good way to kind of put it. So yeah, interesting brain teaser. We'll see whether or not any of these guys kind of skyrocket up the rankings here. Anything that comes out, maybe with regards to the opportunity that you guys are talking about. Hey, you never know. Lots of time, like we said, until the start of the MLR season. So I'm sure there'll be lots of things that will impact your guys' thoughts on a number of these guys between now and then. So we'll get right into it. Like we said, a full draft breakdown of the players and the fantasy impact that we think, in our opinion, they will have, and we'll try to sort through all of this stuff with all these young guns coming into the league now, and like we said at the top of the show, now that we know the spots that they'll be playing in, it'll be a little bit better to kind of predict the opportunity that they may have that may translate to some sort of usefulness in the fantasy rugby world. So before we do get into that, though, I want to go over some quick news and notes between that has dropped between our last episode that was released on Wednesday, the little preview episode. Then I just want to get some quick housekeeping stuff out of the way. The Toronto Arrows have re-signed their big-time staple of their team. They love this guy. Mike Shepard is returning with the Arrows, so just wanted to get that out of the way. And then also there was a draft or a move that happened before the draft that I wanted to get out of the way, is that Atlanta traded Atlanta received salary cap considerations in 2023 and 24, plus New England's 3rd-round pick in the 2024 MLR Collegiate draft for the service rights to Connor Keys. So that happened leading up to the draft. No effect on the 2022 MLR draft, only the 3rd-round pick for the 2024 draft being moved there, but those just some roster moves that we needed to catch up on. And then the last kind of announcement here in the news and notes that I thought I'd fit in here, not exactly a huge announcement with regards to MLR, but an announcement with regards to the Fantasy Ruckers. And I haven't really shared this with you guys yet. I'm not going to say the full thing here. You're going to have to listen to the entirety of the episode. Matt and I are going to talk about it at the end, but it has to do with some special stats that are coming down the pipeline, maybe some more in-depth kind of factors that we'll be able to look at from the 2022 campaign and figure out kind of, how guys were actually playing, and maybe start to look at, hey, if we were to introduce these stats into the fantasy world, how would that play out? How would that change the rankings? Things like tackles, things like ball carry meters, not just on scoring tries, successful passes, things like that. We may have a little bit of access to some of that new stuff. So I'm going to get into more depth about it at the end of the show. You won't want to miss it. So make sure you stay tuned for the entire thing here, or just jump to the end there and you'll be able to see it. Yeah, a big long tease there. You're going to get through. You have to get through our draft breakdown first before you get the nice little nugget there at the end when it comes to stats and fantasy rugby, because we know we've been saying it from the start that we've been dying for more stats here so that we can make this thing an even more dynamic and more fun experience for rugby fans who want to take part in the world of fantasy rugby. So just thought I'd throw that out there as well. So let's move on, guys. It's time. Let's start talking about this, really get into depth and talk about this 2022 MLR Collegiate draft. before we start breaking down the actual specific players, the way that we're going to do this for you guys listening, we're going to break down the first round here, go through each player that was drafted in that first round. We'll talk about some notable ones that maybe were outside that first round. Fitzy is going to mention some of those guys. And then we are going to talk about maybe some surprises with regards to certain players and maybe a sleeper within there from a fantasy perspective, and then reveal our top 5 here and see. I know that we all mentioned that we don't know that how much of a fantasy impact, but we had to rank these guys in the likelihood that they are going to have some sort of fantasy impact and find themselves on a fantasy roster in this upcoming 2023 year. Who is it going to be? We're going to reveal that to you guys. So let's just start off the bat. I mean, Fitzy, I'll go with you first. You had the pleasure of joining the college rugby wrap-up crew and doing a live analysis as the draft is going with them. You did a post-draft show as well. I was watching the draft on Fox Sports too. I had to say the presentation was pretty clean, no hiccups. It was nice to see kind of the background stories on some of these guys. Nothing
like
crazy special.
The smokehouse? You like the smokehouse, the barbecue smokehouse that
the
they're doing this in? You like the big crowd
I knew
too?
you were going to mention something
about the big
that.
Crowd, eh? Hey, you know.
You're freaking cynical. You're cynical. You're always bringing the
MLR draft, right?
Yeah.
All we need is Mr. Killebrew to walk up to the stage, give the jersey, and walk off. You know, we did nothing fancy. That's what the MLR is. We're just grit and grind and smokehouse meat. That's all we are. You know what I mean?
The bare bones. All right. Well, so we know your reaction, Maddie, but Fitzy, for you, watching the whole thing, having to watch it live, bringing that live analysis as well, what'd you kind of think of the whole festivity, the whole thing about the 2022 draft?
Yeah, and I know we've talked about some of the shortcomings of the MLR game broadcasts over the last year, but I do think that they have increased the production value for the draft, right? And I think they have to continue to make it a spectacle, right? Like, particularly because American sporting audiences, North American sporting audiences know what a draft is, particularly talking about the NFL draft, right? The commissioner walking up to the stage, announcing the name. Hopefully in years come, we'll do, the bro handshake and the player will lift, George up and all that good stuff. And I hope that happens. And I think it probably will. But I'd say across the board, if you were just clicking through and you happen to see an MLR draft, what the heck is this? And you check it out. Hopefully it caught someone's interest. But I thought it was fun. I thought it was great. Stuff like this needs to happen from a marketing point of view, from the business side.
Yeah, the one thing, that on a serious note is that could they not have just sent out an invite to some people in Austin? Like, I'm sure there were at least 5 people, like at least, 10, 15 people that would have wanted to come out and watch a little bit of it. But
based on the crowds that we saw at Gilgroni's games, you'd expect at least some of those people. It always looked bumping at Gilgroni's games. You could get some of those guys out.
Yeah, at least some of them wanted to watch their team get absolutely 0 picks. So why wouldn't you, right?
Maybe that's why. Maybe it's because they had. We're gonna get in that, and that was one of the things that I wanted to mention. That it was funny that they didn't have any picks and it was hosted there.
I've got a theory for that now.
We'll get to that. The one thing though that I wanted to that I was kind of laughing at was when I was watching the first pick and I was watching Sam Gola walk up to the podium and I saw Killebrew with the jersey. I was thinking in my head, because how in the NFL they put the jersey on, they take the picture, and he pulls up the jersey and it's a tight looking jersey, and I'm like, is he gonna try to throw that on like over the dress shirt, over the quarter zip that he was wearing? So I'm like, nah, no chance. But I thought that was kind of funny that he was just holding it up there with Killebrew. It's gonna be a little bit trickier to throw in a rugby jersey on top of that, other than a football jersey. So pretty funny. But yeah, I thought. Yeah, I agree with both of you. I thought it was pretty good production value. Obviously, it wasn't anything over the top, but obviously they'll come with time. The one thing that I would have liked, and I guess what was great with you, Fitzy, and the college rugby wrap-up crew, was that there wasn't as much analysis I felt like that was happening during the draft when it came from the MLR production value. I thought it was just a lot about like presenting the players and like, here's their story, here's what they've done, they're joining this team, but they didn't really talk much on, now they're going into this situation, this is what they find themselves in, maybe show the roster, show, these are the wingers this is the front pack that he's joined. There wasn't much of that, and I'm sure that's what you guys were doing over.
They don't even know. They have no idea, right? No, but who knows? Who knows what the rosters are looking like in 2 months' time, right?
Fair enough. But yeah, I thought that was something that that could have been added, but nonetheless, that's what you and the college rugby wrap up boys were there for, to provide that in-depth analysis that we were lacking.
Ryan, as always, Stacey Pates, you're a rock star.
Yeah, great job. She did a fantastic job hosting. She kept it moving, and it was fantastic. So yeah, the overall thoughts on that. I think we're all in consensus here that it wasn't a absolute crazy show. It was pretty good. MLR did a good job. They did what they needed to do. Yeah, all good there. I want to get into now actually the draft picks and some of what the teams did here. We'll talk about Fitzy's mock draft here, and I'm sure based on those mock draft results, there were a lot of surprises that did catch us off guard in this 2022 Collegiate draft. I said it last episode, just based on all of the mock drafts that I was looking at, the differences in where players were going, really the only consensus was Sam Gola was going to be that number 1 overall pick, and then outside of that, it could have been really anyone's game in terms of who was going where. So I'll start with you, Fitzy, kind of your overall surprises from the draft in terms of what players were taken, who was taken where, and what teams were picking certain players.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest shock, and we nearly lost it on the show when it happened, but right. So before the draft, right, Nola Gold swapped picks with DC, and then DC called another one at the end of the second round, right? So Nola traded from 3rd to 2, and there was one theory that potentially Nola's maybe hitting on the fact that Dallas wasn't going to draft Sam Gola, right? So they're like, oh, let's jump ahead of DC to try, and if he falls to us, we'll grab him, right? That obviously did not happen. Dallas drafted Sam with the number 1 overall pick. So then when Sebastiano Velani's name, scrum half from St. Bonaventure, popped up on the screen, we were just like, whoa. I think we were shocked by that because historically, right, scrum halves haven't really been drafted in Major League Rugby. There were 2 last year. Nola coincidentally drafted one of them. Maybe that was 2 years ago, but we were surprised that was what Nola was identifying as their pick. And look, Sebastiano Velani is a quality scrum half. He's probably one of the top 2 scrum halves in the draft. Good size guy out of Lindenwood, right? A really good, strong program here in the U.S. But we were kind of shocked by that move. But you know, looking back over what Nola Gold and GM Ryan Fitzgerald has done over the last 2 years, he's put together some really banging drafts, right? And he's drafted Brian Ault, guy who's a starter, who's in the front row, who's a good player, right? And Guerra, hopefully, you know, the flanker who injured himself in the USA Eagles All Blacks game last year. You know, he was a phenomenal player in 2020. Hopefully he is back, or 21. Hopefully he's back and can play. And you know, so and George Shark, right? Again, these aren't fantasy guys, right, from a fantasy perspective, but in just terms of building, you know, teams, 3 that they hit on out of like 4 or 5. That's pretty solid. So we were surprised to see a scrum half go 2nd overall, and I think that kind of started the tone for one. You know, GMs are looking for something specific, but 2, it just started the trend of my mock draft just got completely blown up. And it was fun watching it just burn in real time.
Right. The more important thing, right, that the mock draft is all messed up. And I mean, I did mention, and it's funny that you mentioned that, Fitzy, but I will say that I don't think the idea of the mock draft is necessarily to get it perfectly right. It's more of a brain exercise of just, you know, what do teams need? It's more about what the teams and what they're picking rather than the actual mock draft. But yeah, Matt, I mean, you're
it's impossible. Like it is impossible for these mock drafts. Like, one, you know, lack of information, lack of data, lack of statistics, lack of visibility, right? Like I can't see, there's no way for me to be able to watch every college game in rugby. You know, I can watch the 7 tournaments that are broadcasted. I would have to go looking for some of the college games. And then when you go to talk about Canada, I know for a fact that, you know, those aren't being broadcasted anywhere live. Or anywhere like on a TV network or anything that. So these mock drafts are impossible. And really, after the first pick, you're kind of just throwing darts at the wall, right? Hoping to see if something sticks. But I mean, the big surprise for me, and kind of relates to the mock draft and what blew up all the mock drafts, is all those Canadians that were picked in the top, you know, top 6, 7 picks. I mean, I'm watching these guys, and Ryan, I was texting you during, I was like, oh, like, he's getting drafted right now. Like, this is like, I didn't even hear anything about this. I didn't even see their names in the draft prospect board on the MLR website. So it's like, I'm looking at these and I'm like, whoa, like these guys are all getting drafted. How many are there going to be more Canadians getting drafted this year? And that just kind of, one, blew up everybody's mock draft, and two, just surprised me, happily surprised, but it was definitely a surprise for me.
Yeah, I mean, that you guys kind of nailed it there. Big surprises for me. Nola trading up for a scrum half. Obviously, I talked about it last episode that Nola clearly had someone in mind, right? When you make a move like that, you have some sort of idea of who you're targeting. You know, maybe it was, to your point, Fitzy, maybe they had some thought that maybe Sam Gola would fall to them and maybe that they'd have a shot at taking him. Or maybe it was that Sebastian Velani really was the guy that they were targeting. They wanted to make sure that they were going to get him. I'm not quite sure on what their kind of angle was at that, but it appears to be that it was the scrum half that they were trying to get. Yeah, lots of Canadian players getting drafted.
Well, Ryan, and if you look back, and I was scrolling along on Twitter too, and a tweet from Pat Clifton, who's kind of a big name in rugby journalism circles here in the U.S., who helps out with Premier Rugby Sevens and NCR and the May Madness. He had tweeted out that, and I think I had said Sebastiano Velani went to St. Bonaventure. Sorry, Bonnie's, but St. Bonaventure played at a May Madness New Orleans down where obviously Nola Gold is, and apparently that's where he really had a really strong tournament. Ryan Fitzgerald, the GM for Nola, was there, and Pat Clifton tweeted about it after that pick was over, right? So certainly, as Maddie said, like, we can't see all of the college games, right, but these GMs are at certain places. They got their scouting departments everywhere. They must have honed in on him back in May when they saw him there, and they were like, "This is somebody we need to keep an eye on." Even though we've got a great scrum half in Damian Stephens, which I think was the other surprising thing.
Right, yeah. which we'll get into, and I think that's a good point, right? I think that's what's so interesting about the MLR specifically, and kind of the stages at where it's at in terms of a league, because unlike more established leagues like the NFL, NHL, MLB, these power leagues in North America, it's hard not to learn more about these prospects when they catch fire. You know what I mean? It's hard to not find out about a guy when he's really, really good and making shockwaves in the circles of the quote unquote, scouts and the GM. So, but I think with how new the MLR is and how new the growth of rugby is in North America with regards to that perspective, with regards to youth talent and things like that, not just the international scale when it comes to just, the USA Eagles or Rugby Canada. It's now we're focusing on these collegiate teams. We're focusing on these May Madness tournaments. We're focusing on these, different competitions that are happening throughout the year from an amateur standpoint, that these guys are kind of falling through the cracks, and you're getting these names in the draft. You're like, oh my God. So we'll see whether or not that kind of sticks as the league continues to grow. And obviously there's more coverage on the league. It'll be interesting to see whether that sticks and we get surprised by these certain picks. But yeah, that was something that definitely was shocking. I will say maybe it's not so much of a surprise for me, but I kind of put it down here as a surprise that AG, the Gilgronis and the Giltinis had no picks. It was hilarious that the Gilgronis had one pick in the draft, right? Is this what you were alluding to?
Yeah, I've got my theory on this.
What's your theory? This is your time.
There's no reason why they would not take salary cap and international slots. The teams with salary cap issues, allegedly, payment issues, allegedly, Mr. Gilchrist,
right.
They are trying to rack in salary cap and international spots.
That's some good investigative work, man.
That's clearly, a really good job, dude. They're clearly trying to cover something that they need. Man, maybe they're expecting to go over the salary cap this year.
Dude, that's some next level journalism work, dude. That's
look,
really
me and
good.
Gilchrist, me and Gilchrist are just tight. He lets me know. He lets me know what he's up to sometimes.
But honestly, I mean, you joke about it. I'm not going to say, we have to say allegedly, but yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if that has something to do with that whole situation. But not going to stick with that on. Haven't heard much else from that. No comment. But here, let's now move on to breaking down some of these guys and start breaking down what it means for fantasy, and who out of these first round players are someone that you would consider to take a flyer on in those late rounds, in the 13th, 14th, 15th rounds at a shot, and maybe they do have some significant impact in the 2023 year. We're going to go down the line here just as they were drafted, and we'll start off with the Dallas Jackals with that first round pick. I mentioned it before the episode. In the previous episode, there was really only one solidified thing when it came to mock drafts all across the league. Obviously, it played to fruition here when the draft actually happened. Sam Gola of the Cal Bears, drafted to the Dallas Jackals, played lock and flanker in California. Looks like he'll be transitioning, and Fitz, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like he'll most likely be playing as a back row player in the MLR. It seems like that he'll translate to that at least a professional level. Obviously, that in itself will have a lot of fantasy implications. But before I get into kind of the fantasy situation and where he falls himself into and talking about the fantasy impact, Fitzy, what are your thoughts on Sam Gola? I feel like it's a pretty easy pick here for the Dallas Jackals at number 1.
Yeah, I mean, the only way Dallas could have screwed up this pick is if they didn't select Sam there, right? I think he was probably the consensus number 1 overall. 4-year, 5-year player at Cal Bear, a really decorated collegiate player, finalist for the Rudy Schultz Award, D1A Collegiate All-American first team, like you name the honor, the guy's gotten it before. And what was really cool to see was that he was actually the first Cal Bear who's been drafted in Major League Rugby. Cal, a very storied program, but all of the Cal players in MLR were not drafted. Christian Dyer, right, was rocking out in Houston. He was a supplemental pick, I think, 2 years ago, right? So cool for Sam to go. Fantasy impact, we'll see. Probably got an opportunity to, obviously, first pick, you want him to play. So I think he's got a good chance of competing for a number 1 job. We'll see what kind of a fantasy impact he makes, if any.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if anybody's gonna have a chance at getting on that starting roster, and the team that probably is the least solidified and that had the least amount of success last year, is the Dallas Jackals, and a guy with his resume and caliber, you can see him at least having a shot at getting into that back row. I mean, Matarazzo was pretty good, but it's always nice to inject some young talent in there.
Yeah, and I will mention that I think a big focus here for the Dallas Jackals is also to collect guys that are going to make an impact when it comes to establishing a culture with their club, especially being a brand new team, just joining the MLR. Obviously, they had their struggles last season, and they went through I'm not going to allow this. I'm not going to stop.
They gotta get guys that are grounded. Right, they need to get the guys that are grounded so that they can't.
I didn't want to bring it up, so we didn't go down this trap, Matt. I can't.
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up when Fitzy said that they couldn't have, the only way they could have got it wrong was by. I was gonna say, well, I know a few ways they could have got it wrong.
Nonetheless, they have to pick guys that are going to really promote their rugby culture. This is a guy that, obviously on the field, he's proven what he can do. He captained the Cal Bears, their undefeated 22 season, unfortunately falling short in that Western Conference final against St. Mary's. But he's a guy that's going to bring those leadership skills. He's going to establish that culture and really become the foundation of that club. So I think this is a fantastic pick for not only his on the field performance, but also off the field stuff too.
Yeah, and I was surprised, Fitzy, that you said that's the first Cal Bear, because I mean, to me, Cal Bears, like Cal Bears and Cal Berkeley, like they're the one of the powerhouses in the States, right? It's Life University. It's Cal Bears. I remember playing against them down there. They love rugby. They have a huge football stadium, but hey, they got a great rugby fan base. They got great coaching. They love. It's big there, and they care about it. And the guys that are coming out of there are going to be quality talent players, because guys like him, guys like Seth Purdy, they're coming out and they've gone through 4 years of good development at Cal.
And I will say that it was somewhat refreshing to see, and I should have mentioned this in the surprises, but in the previous drafts, you've seen a lot of Life guys, signing a lot of Lindenwood guys. I know 5 players were drafted. I think they did lead the draft. Lindenwood did again. But nonetheless, it was nice to see. And a lot of that had to do with the Canadian guys getting drafted, was that there was just a lot of, I feel like, spectrum of players that were coming from a wide variety of different places than just seeing, your typical schools up in there. So that was sort of refreshing to see. Want to get your guys' opinion, though, on the fantasy perspective with this player. He hops into a situation, Matt, you kind of mentioned it, where there is room for him to kind of establish himself as a potential starter. The notable, I'm going to go with a back row positions because it does sound like he's going to shift that back. That's a whole nother different conversation because Fitzy, I'm sure you listened to the episode about our conversation about how good Matt was at picking locks, but we know how much of a significant impact, or I should say how little of a significant impact that locks really had in the fantasy season in our league. Now, I think that is going to be an interesting dynamic if Sam Gola does suit up at the lock position. Is he going to fall into the trap of being just another one of those locks that isn't, at least from a fantasy perspective, I want to remind all the listeners that this is all through a fantasy lens. We're not saying that he's not a good player. At least from a fantasy perspective, he was at the lock position. He may not perform as well when it comes to fantasy numbers as he would from a back row position. So that's an interesting dynamic on its own. But let's assume that he moves to the back row position and he is getting those opportunities and he is getting those touches. He's fitting with Conrado Rura, who finished 71st overall in the fantasy season, finished as the 7th best back row player with 35.2 total fantasy points. So the opportunity is there. Maybe Gola is able to slot into that and do something similar to what Rura does. Is that something that you're seeing particularly with him because of his talent and because that he finds himself on a Dallas Jackals team that needs players right now?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, he's gotta prove that he can play with the big boys. I
mean, he's 6'5", 255, man. He's a big boy,
6'5",
dude.
255. But at the end of the day, there are experienced guys that are playing in this MLR league. And, I think what we'll see is he'll start off the bench. He'll come off the bench. Dallas doesn't really have that great depth.
Mike Matarazzo, Adrian Boyson. Those are some
right
of the
when
names
they got
there.
hit with injuries. They struggled with depth. But having him coming off the bench, at least to start, and then I think this guy is going to be somebody who will get on the waiver wire for sure, and be somebody who, once we see him in that starting lineup, one of the league members is going to take a flyer on him, and then he's going to, at some point, he's going to blow up. So yeah, I can definitely see it happening like that.
Is he, Fitzy, I'll go to you to this one. Is he worth drafting with your, let's say he's still there at your 14th or 15th pick, and maybe at this point that he's not going to be starting heading into the season. Let's say there's a wide consensus that he'll be coming off the bench. Are you willing, because of his talent, to stash him on your bench and hold him until he makes that starting start like in the MLR in his first start in a Dallas Jackals jersey? Or is he a guy that you really don't want to waste a roster spot on, and you'll put the fab money down when the waiver wire does come around?
Yeah, I think I put the fab dollars on him when he comes around and when he gets into the starting lineup, right? I anticipate and expect him to probably be around week one starter. And I'll take a late round flyer on him if he is sitting there, because you just never know. He's got some ball carrying skills. He could probably pop. But I mean, again, looking just historically, again, we only have like 1 year of our scoring. But if you look at forwards, there were maybe 3 or 4 in the top 40, and there wasn't a lock in the top 40. He's probably going to be more of a flanker, but I think Lance Williams was the top scoring flanker last year. So
right.
It's hard. It's going to be hard for me to have him on the roster until he starts to put up some real big numbers. And maybe he does round one, but I'll keep an eye on him. He's getting drafted. He's going to be late in the round, and you take a flyer and you hold him on your roster for weeks 1 and 2, and then you evaluate from there.
Right. Now, I will say that if he does end up playing in the second row and he ends up being a guy that's making a significant impact, the advantage, his fantasy value is going to skyrocket, because the advantage that you'll have, we saw what none of those second rows were able to do last season when it comes to fantasy performance. If he's able to become that outlier, maybe becomes last year's, Tavit Lopetti, where he's just that guy that comes in here and he's just, making impact right away at a position that really doesn't make that impact on a regular basis. That's going to be absolutely huge. So we'll see what he does, but there's no question though. I think that we can all agree that the talent is there. It's just now we got to see the opportunity, and we got to see whether or not that translates to the professional level. Let's move on here to the NOLA goal now. thing that we mentioned that we were quite surprised at with the player that they selected by moving up into that second spot. Sebastian Velani, scrum half from St. Bonaventure. Fitzy, you mentioned about him. You went to depth with him. So I don't think we need to go into too much depth about his kind of playing style. He's a little bit undersized, but he's fast. He's got good decision-making skills.
Is that accurate, Ryan? 5'5", 155.
I believe so.
You telling me 5'5", 155.
Yes.
No, he's bigger than that.
Dude, I don't know. On St. Bonaventure's site, that's what they had him listed as.
St. Bonaventure, you guys got to do him better, right? Like,
that's what they had him listed. I could be wrong.
Look like he's 1'5", 155, because that to me looks like he might not make it through one game.
Fitzy, you got to fact check me on that, but I did see that
he's bigger than that.
On St. Bonaventure's website.
Hey,
I'm sorry to Velani if that's untrue, but he should really
have 5'5", 155. It is not fun. Not in a men's game, all right? It is not fun. You don't want to be there.
That's what I was when I was playing my premiership days.
And
at
are you still playing?
Yeah, true. But yeah, Velani, if you're listening to this, blame it on your alma mater, because that's what they had on
they
your
took his page
school
down
website.
off the site.
They knew they messed up.
Maybe it was an old weight and old height, and maybe he had a big growth
spurt. They just didn't factor in. They didn't factor in the size of the guy's heart. Right.
Okay. So getting serious here. Yeah, a lot of surprises here that Velani got chosen where he was. Fitzy, you kind of mentioned it, his performance in kind of these tournaments really had his draft stock skyrocket. I think a big part of that was his participation in the Collegiate Rugby Shield as well. He had a big time performance in there, which kind of solidified the fact that, hey, this guy could be someone that could be a starting MLR scrum half. Don't need to go into too much. The
only thing I wanted to say, like, just to, because we already talked about him so much, and I didn't get a chance to say this earlier, but the only thing that I really wanted to say is that, it's weird to me, a team to trade up and pick a spot where they have somebody who was getting into form at the end of the year. And that leads to question to me is Damian Stevens a lock for next year?
That's
why would they draft a scrum half at number 2 if they knew that they had Damian Stevens as a lock? And Damian Stevens is not, old. He's not Aiden. He's a young athletic guy, same type player. That is the one point that I just wanted to point out, because that kind of screams like, hey, is something going on here? Is something maybe they see something that we don't?
Good point.
35th overall fantasy finish. He was the fourth best scrum half from a fantasy perspective. A lot of that, Matt, you mentioned it happening towards the tail end of that year where he really exploded, became Nola's guy towards that tail end of the season. 49.8 total fantasy points throughout that campaign. Yeah, that was the big question that I took from it, is that, you already got a guy named Damian Stevens. Now you're picking a scrum half with high draft capital. For me, it could either go two ways. It's either, hey, maybe MLR teams really don't, care about the draft when it comes to, in terms of valuing these picks. They're just trying to pick guys that they get, build the depth. Maybe it's not a guy that you're going to necessarily be too worried about if he's not starting for you right away. They're not the same value as, let's say, an NFL draft pick, where if a guy's selected in the first round, you're expecting that guy to start right away, and he's going to be that hands down kind of go-to guy. Fitzy, who's starting for the Nola Gold, man? Who if you had to put your money on it, who's coming around here? Who should fantasy owners be picking when it comes to Nola Gold's scrum half position?
I mean, you got to think Stevens, but maybe Maddie's onto something, right? I think what is fascinating about how some of these contracts work is, and with rugby being a full year across the calendar, is Stevens going to be on Nola Gold's roster by the time, January, February of 23 rolls around? We don't know, but, Matt raises a good point that we don't know. And/or, maybe they just saw him. They're like, this is the scrum half we need to get. We can lock him in for the next couple of years. He's going to push Stevens. I don't know, but it's a very fascinating trade to go up there to grab him like that. And you got to think you're going to give him an opportunity to see the field. So maybe they'll just push each other. Or maybe he plays somewhere else. Maybe they slot him in at wing or something like that.
Right.
That sounds crazy.
So, we've seen that before. And it isn't crazy to say, too. We've seen strategies by teams as well by splitting up. having a fresh 9 at the 60-minute mark, you know what I mean, and getting a guy to come in there, it's not, it's
not great for fantasy though. That's not
great. That you're right, not great for. This is a fantasy show. That's good for you, man. This is good.
Yeah. No, I remember that this is that show, and I still suck at it. So,
all right. Let's move on to some boys. Let's get to some of the Matt's boys. This is where Matt wants to be at. And we'll start off by a guy that's been highly touted, Calixto Martinez, prop from UBC, that is University of British Columbia. Matt's alma mater there. He's pretty pumped up about this pick. Matt, I'll just toss it to you then, man. Calixto Martinez going at 3 to the Old Glory DC. Why don't you Fitzy is a DC fan, why don't you serenade him with the beautiful sounds of how good Cal is as being a part of that UBC program?
Look, you have to call him Calixto for now, but I call him Cali. Maybe you'll be boys one day, and you'll call him Cali. But man, I mean, I don't have enough good things to say. And I think they mentioned this in the broadcast, that the fact that DC is not just getting a great player, right? They're getting a great guy, just a great man, like somebody who is, textbook, like when you think of rugby standards and rugby characteristics that the top of the top teams are looking for, this guy has them. But to speak to his kind of rugby skills, I mean, look, athletic prop, has also had experience playing hooker. The guy can move. And we know that those guys, those props that are athletic and that can move and can kind of hang out on the wing potentially and break the line and have the pace to keep going. Those are the guys that are really going to impact in fantasy, but also, be an impact on the field. I've got too much good things to say about him. But
you like the sound of that, Fitzy? You like the sound of that?
I mean, what I most like about the pick is, hearing all those great things that Maddie is saying. But so the guy's 25. He's a Canadian prospect, but he's also USA eligible as well. Apparently, I was reading somewhere. So for a men's Eagles fan, I'm excited about that.
Stop trying to steal our players. Hey, stop it. No, this is not. We're not allowing this to happen.
Hold on. At this point, if Canada hasn't identified him yet, then if USA picks him up, then all to him. That's Canada's fault. Enough. That's Canada's loss.
Yeah. I mean, I think from a fantasy perspective, I think Old Glory's they did a really good job this year drafting guys for the tight 5. I'm really excited to see what they're going to bring out round 1. And we're going to talk about a hooker that they got from Cal, speaking of another Cal player. But speaking of Martinez, I'm excited for it. And this was just another guy, just blinders for me from a Canadian prospect point of view. I just didn't know who he was, right? But then reading about him and hearing other things and hearing Maddie gush about him, it sounds like he's a good stand-up dude. So I'm excited, and we'll see.
He dominates in the scrum, right, Maddie? We love guys that dominate in the scrum.
Definitely dominates in the scrum. And open field, he's just bread and butter. He'll make the gain line, and if he breaks or if he needs to run a support line, he'll run that support line. And he'll do the work. So, but interesting, Ryan. He's coming into a pretty crowded situation over there.
Right. I was just going to say, I mean, he's going in, if Matt, you mentioned that he does have some sort of hooker experience. They have that position pretty much locked up, at least from what we saw last year with Robbie Armescu playing at that position for a large portion of the season. Who knows, maybe, if we can transfer that. But yeah, front row, at least prop guys that he'll be going in with on Old Glory DC, Jack Iscaro, 302nd overall finish from a fantasy perspective, the 48th overall front row player, only 4.1 total fantasy points, so really not doing much. Jake Ilnicki, 316th overall, the 50th front row position, and then Kyle Stewart there, 350th overall. So really no one from a fantasy perspective really making an impact. I'm not too sure of whether that's indicative of the way that Old Glory DC plays or whether or not they're just waiting for a guy like Cal to come in there and become that fantasy dominator. Who knows?
It'll be a battle though, for sure. I mean, Ilnicki, Canadian international, Iscaro, a young American that's coming up, and Cali, the same kind of young Canadian / American coming up. So it'll be a battle there. It's crowded, but it'll be a battle to see.
We'll see. And let's move on. I'm going to bunch these two guys up, Maddie, because I know you like them both, or excuse me, that you at least like one of them very close. Seth Purdy. He's going to the Rugby Atlanta team. He's a center drafted from the Cal Bears, and then we also got Owen Rutten going from UBC, another UBC boy, flanker, drafted to the Toronto Arrows, which really wasn't much of a surprise if you knew his background. Not surprising to see that he's an Arrows jersey. But why don't you start with Purdy, Matt?
Hey, Seth Purdy might be coming from Cal Bears, but that guy is a Canadian, so you can't take him away. It is what it is. But yeah, no, I mean, surprising pick for sure. I didn't see that coming. I've played with Seth in the past. It's I've always played with him on the wing, so I'm surprised that I know that he played center at Cal, but he definitely has experience on the wing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him moved out there this year for Rattle, just because Will Leonard, Ryan Nell, I'm not exactly sure where those guys are going or what's the plan with them, but those guys were a pretty good pair, I thought, watching throughout the season. Maybe not fantasy wise, but they're a pretty good pair to see. So I can see him probably being out on the wing for Rattle. And then Owen and
Curly.
I'll say a story that the first time I met this guy when I was like 14, 13 in age grade rugby, this guy had the biggest curly afro ever. So he suddenly got the name Curly, and that kind of, I didn't know his first name for a pretty long time there.
Right. And funny story. So we're watching the draft, right, Fitzy, and I see the name Owen Rutten go across the name or go across the board on the broadcast, and it didn't hit to me because Matt and I have been calling him Curly. Like, we only know him as Curly. Like, ever since that Matt's been playing with him, and we've been going to games on Saturdays and things like that. And whenever we'd see him at the pitch, it'd always be Curly. And then Matt goes, "Oh yeah, like Curly got drafted." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, I forgot his name was Owen Rutten." Like, I completely forgot. But yeah, just funny.
But yeah, I mean, he's going into a really busy back row room in Toronto, and I mean, I mean, like, I don't see that as a problem. Like, he's got the work rate, he's got the skill, and just the honestly the pure grit to get into the dirty places that a lot of players just will refuse to get into. And he will, he's the guy that will approach that line of legal and getting a penalty, right? And he will play with that line and just see how far he can take it constantly. And, those are the guys that you love to see. He's that type of guy. But again, he's going into a really crowded room. He won't play at 8. He'll play at flanker. He can't play locked. So, crowded room, but I'm excited to see the guy get in at some point, because Toronto has always been one to rotate their young guys in as well.
And before Fitzy jumps into some of these American players that are coming up, just to mention just some of the guys that these new draftees will be competing with. Seth Purdy, Matt mentioned it. If he is going to be playing at that center position, he'll be jumping into a room with both Will Leonard and Ryan Nell, who were the center positions there. Leonard was a focal point when it comes to fantasy offenses, finishing 51st overall. He was the 9th highest scoring center for our season, and then 43.4 total fantasy points for him. Ryan Nell, not as much of an impact, but what kind of gives me pause in terms of the impact that Seth Purdy can have if he is to hop in at center. Ryan Nell does have those leadership qualities. He was named co-captain, so obviously his kind of establishment with Rugby Atlanta is an important one, and to kind of overthrow that might be a little bit tricky for Seth Purdy to do in his rookie year, but we'll see. Nonetheless, the opportunity is there for him if he does take it. And then Owen Rutten, again, he's competing with a very, very busy back room, like Matt mentioned. Ronan Foley, 85th overall, the 9th highest back row player. Lucas Rumble, the 25th highest back row player when it comes to fantasy. And then you add names like Thomas De La Vega, James O'Neill, who all made significant contributions in the season as well. So Owen's gonna get the experience, man. He's gonna learn a lot from a lot of really solid players, and he gets to stay north of the border as well. So he's going back home, exactly. So that's pretty cool to see. Let's hop to the next couple picks here. Chase Jones and Trent Rogers, both going to the NOLA Gold. Chase Jones, a lock from St. Mary's. Trent Rogers, a prop from Kutztown. Fitzy, what are your thoughts on these guys here and the impact that they may have in a fantasy landscape?
Yeah, I think Chase Jones, he will probably be more of a flanker for NOLA Gold. He's 6'4". You probably want him a little bit bigger if you want him as a lock. We've talked about the challenges scoring as a lock in MLR. So, but more than likely, Chase Jones will slot in at flanker. St. Mary's College, rival of Cal. Good programs, good teams there, good players that come out of there. I'm really excited about Trent Rogers. We talked about it on the show last night, on the live show. It's the year of the prop. Trent Rogers. Watch highlight tape of this kid. He's 6'1", 285, but he's got some sick moves. Just watch him running in the open field and throwing dummy passes on people. Like, you're like, wow, this guy has got a ton of athleticism. So, again, prop position. Nola Gold, they know exactly what they're looking for. From a fantasy perspective, I don't know if we can count on them to make a huge impact, at least through the first couple of weeks. I think we got to figure out how they slide in, if they're going to get quality, solid playing time. But all of a sudden, if you're looking at Nola Gold's pack, they're getting young and they're getting big and they're getting athletic, which is scary if you're going up against them.
Yeah,
and a lot of picks, and they're using them. So
they're using them. And just to mention some guys that they'll be fighting with: Trent Rogers coming into a front row room that includes Kevin Sullivan, Dino Waldron, both of them finishing within the around top 250 of our fantasy rankings. Sullivan, the 32nd front row on the year. Dino Waldron, the 40th front rower. So not really much fantasy impact there. And then you look at Chase Jones. He's going to step into a second row room that includes Billy Stewart, Ignacio Dottie, and William Wagaspack. Again, some of them having some fantasy impact, but definitely an ability to potentially, make a move there. You mentioned back row players there. He'll be able to slot into there as well. So we'll see or not. As
even
we wrap
that's a
up,
crowded room too. I mean, Devin Short, I know that guy was definitely a staple for Nola. So
Cam Dolan.
Yep, Cam Dolan. Right. So it'll be quite. It's busy no matter what position he's in.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, that's all the picks that Nola Gold had in their first round. Fitzy, would you say this was a successful draft? I mean, they built a lot of draft capital getting into that first round. Did they use it like you expected? And is it the right way that they used it?
You know what? I played scrum half, fly half, fullback in college, right? So I'm partial to the backs, right?
Right.
This year, and just looking over all the picks, in my mind, it seemed like there was a lot of depth and a lot of talent in the forward pack, particularly in the front row. And I think we kind of saw that a little bit in this draft. And I think that's exactly what Nola Gold wanted to do. They wanted to get younger, bigger, and more athletic there, and I think that's what they did in their tight five. So to them, we'll see when the games roll around. Surprising getting a scrum half second overall to trade up to get him, but they must see him, something in him that they really like, and they maybe to Maddie's point, maybe he's out there as the starting 9 come February. So we'll see. But Fitzgerald, the GM, did some really good drafts over the past couple of years, so he's got a good track record for picking talent.
If you want,
think he's hit here.
If you wanted a guy that had 3 first-round picks, he'd be one of the guys that you want to be making those big decisions. Let's move on here.
Him or Matty E.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not too sure
if
about
they
that.
want to end up 8th, we'll see.
If they want that first overall pick next year, then they would want him to do that. Exactly.
Well, not even that. I can't even figure out how to do that. But anyways, move on.
Yeah, let's move on here. We're going to go through the next 3 picks here. Ethan Hager going to the Dallas Jackals. Another name that I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. Kakoakawi.
I think you nailed it. Yeah.
Is that good? Kakoakawi? All right. For a scrum half from Kutztown, drafted to the Utah Warriors. Too bad Vandy's not here to talk about that. I'm sure he has something to say about his team's rebuilding process. And then Matt Gelhaus, also from Kutztown, a lock, drafted to Rugby Atlanta. Matt, I'll go with you first for Ethan Hager because you did play with this guy. And then Fitzy, I'll go for you the next 2 guys.
I mean, Hager, great guy. I mean, the guy is a shifty, fast, tall winger. Definitely winger or fullback, back 3. He'll be competing with Naposki, the usual guys over there in Dallas. And I think Naposki was drafted last year. He was drafted last year. So, interesting. They've got a young little back 3 room over there. But they definitely had lots of rotation last year. So it'll be good to see Hager hopefully get a spot there. And then, I mean, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about was Kakoakawi. The fact that he is, I mean, what an interesting pick this is. I mean, you're thinking about that room, and when I saw it, I'm thinking about that room of Niall Saunders, Danny Christensen, Zion going, all 3 guys who had opportunities to start last year. I mean, all 3 of them started at some point. And then you go in and drafted another scrum half. It raises questions, and I wonder I wonder, and again, just like Velani, I wonder if there's something going on with those roster spots.
The thing that kind of, I had that same reaction when I saw that pick too. The thing though that has kind of tempered the funkiness that is going on here, for lack of better terms, he is a Utah native. So maybe there are some ties there, you know, bringing a guy home, you know, again, we don't know how valuable
a guy home,
these
sit
teams.
him on the bench. Doesn't matter where
Hey,
he's
it's
from.
all about development, right? Who knows? He
it.
may be a star. We don't know, man. It could be the way that rugby and the way that the teams value the draft.
I guess that's why we rely on Fitzy here. I mean,
exactly.
Fitzy,
So
you might know way more about these guys than I do for sure.
Right. So what about Cowan and what about Gelhaus?
Yeah, my thought on Koko is that, yeah, I think there is that local tie. And Brandon Sparks was on an interview the day before. He was talking about scouting guys in their own backyard to then, from a marketing standpoint, be able to tell that story to connect with the fan base, right? Like, here's a guy that grew up in the area that folks know about. Now he's back with the hometown club to try and bring out some fans, some young folks. So I think there's maybe a marketing business perspective. But obviously, you want to win on the field, of course.
That's a pretty good
Matt brings up a good point.
Too.
Yeah, Matty brings up a good point, though, right? Like, it seemed like they're pretty solid at the scrum half position, right? Like, they all had some good games last year, even though it was probably Utah's not their best year or what they expected. But Utah's got a brand new coach, and not a brand new coach, but they got a new coach in Greg Cooper. So maybe he was looking across the roster and saying, hey, I want a little more input on players that are coming in. And there must have been something about Kakoa that they liked to take him. You know, the second scrum half in the first round. It's so wild. You know, it's crazy. Right. I love it.
It's crazy. So, hey, yeah. I mean, as a former scrum half myself, former scrum half for Matt, and hey, we just found out that you're a scrum half too, Fitzy. So welcome to the club here. It's always good to see.
How about quickly? I was a scrum half that never passed.
What about Matt Gelhaus? Thoughts on him going to Rugby Atlanta?
Yeah, that one. Again, I think I don't think he's got the size to be a lock. I think he's probably going to most likely move to probably to flanker. I could be wrong. He's 6'5", he's 240. He's got some good size there. To me, I think that's a good depth move for Rugby ATL. Good young player. I like him. A fantasy perspective. You know, who's he battling with there?
It'd be Johan Mumsen, Justin Basson were two guys that were big there.
Right?
Yeah, he was the best second.
Lock,
he was the best second row player from a fantasy perspective last year.
Yeah.
So that's the competition that he has.
You know?
Yeah, we'll see. And then just to backtrack a little bit, Ethan Hager, Matt, you mentioned it, kind of a rotating door of kind of back three players in Dallas right now. So I think he does have a chance to solidify himself. Really, just Eric Naposki there, guys that he have to compete with. Alejandro Torres made some appearances as winger, but he's usually at that fullback position as well. And then you talk about guys like Roderick Waters, Hayden Hill, who kind of made appearances towards the end of the season. Didn't really solidify that position. Lots of guys there. So Ethan Hager will definitely have a fair shot at trying to then, hey, we talked about opportunity. He'll definitely get it. Maybe we'll see if he's one of those guys that's making a fantasy impact. Kakoakawi, we mentioned it. He's competing with Niles Saunders, who finished in the top 10 of scrum halves last season. Danny Christensen even had a lot of appearance, finishing scrum half 13 with 19.5 total fantasy points. He definitely did. I remember that. And then Gelhaus, we quickly said he's stepping in with Mumsen and Basson, which will be a tricky depth chart to break through, at least if he's staying at the second row position. Moving on here to the last three picks of the draft in that first round. The prop, the very first one from Lindenwood University, the first player being selected from Lindenwood University in this draft out of 5 players that were selected the most in the 2022 collegiate draft. Gabe Kettering going to the Utah Warriors. All I can say before I throw it to you, Fitzy, because I know you had really high expectations when it came to this guy. America Rugby News in the draft preview and when they were outlining and describing this guy, all they said was physical specimen. That was it.
Did you see the picture, the video when he got drafted? The picture where he was wearing like a tank?
Right.
The dude was like a man amongst boys. Like, you talk about, you know, like the modern prop right now. Gabe Kettering, like, are you kidding me? Like, that dude is a monster. And I think the reason why I had him so high, and I wouldn't say he drops so much, but in hindsight, it's always 2020. Apparently, he is going to go play in Ireland for a year and study for a master's degree. So he's not even going to play in MLR this year, and then he's going to come back. So Utah were like, hey, we got to snatch this guy up before someone grabs him and he becomes a free agent and goes where he wants to go. So,
I mean, I would draft him because he's doing that. right? You know, you don't you don't get him, but you also have fairly decent prop room.
Paul Mullen, Angus McClellan, Emerson Pryor.
Emerson Pryor is your young guy that you were implementing in late in the year, and also our boy. But yeah, I mean, I would almost draft him for that, right? Like, you're going over to another country to train. I'm assuming to play with the school that he's going to.
He's gonna play, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, like, that seems like almost like a plus. But yeah, when you're a man amongst boys, you can really go anywhere, can't you?
And then let's talk about Shane Barry going to Seattle Seawolves. He was listed as a winger on MLR's post, but he played fly half at UCLA. So he's going to be a distributor for the Seawolves. He's going to learn, obviously, from I believe from AJ Alatimu, right? Like, AJ Alatimu will be there next year.
I mean, if it's not Alatimu, he learns from Kieran Joyce. You know,
so deep room there again. So I can't expect that Shane Barry will be having any really fantasy impact in this next year.
But look out for him in another year or two, right? Like, what a good place to go to and learn from. And everything that I've read about Barry is that phenomenal player. The guys from England, you know, he has an opportunity, you know, for a year or so to learn from AJ and others, and then maybe compete for a starting job in a following year.
Yeah.
You know, what a good landing spot for him to be on, I'd say.
I mean, to be fair, like, Kieran Joyce really didn't get that much playing time at 10 anyway. So, you know, you get a true, and Kieran Joyce has had the opportunity to play at center and knows how to play at center. So maybe this is their guy that they want to be coming off the bench and have a guy that they can develop. So I wouldn't be surprised. I did see some of the highlight tapes. He did look good. I like the distribution. He was able to hit a lot of good lines. So that was a really good thing to see. And yeah, great pick for the Seawolves.
And then the last guy of the first round that we got to talk about is Doyle. A future scrum out there right?
Future scrum out there we go. Yeah.
Cece, go downstairs, your mom.
That's hilarious. We gotta get that ready for the 2030 MLR draft. Come on.
Just trying to grab my AirPods.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, you are.
That's the type of grit and determination we will need to start up the women's MLR draft, the inaugural women's MLR league. That's the type of grit and determination. You know, trying to get what you want when you can get it.
This is a Fantasy Ruckers first right here.
There we go. No, it's all good. But yeah, while we're breaking this down, let's move over to Doyle Hedgepath, the prop from Queen's University of Charlotte, drafted to Rugby New York. I know Matt has a whole bunch to talk about when it comes to the position that Hedgepath finds himself in. It's going to be an interesting one. He comes from, like I said, the Queen's University of Charlotte. Front row, he's going to be hopping into a room that's filled with Chance Wangluski and Nick Mayhew. He was a USA U23 select. He converted. This was the interesting thing, is that he was converted from the center position. And Fitzy, you talked about it, about guys that are athletic, front rowers that look like they shouldn't be front rowers and are making moves in the open space that they shouldn't be making. And it sounds like among those guys is going to be Doyle Hedgepath.
Until about 7:45, I forget what time he might have got picked. I had no idea who Doyle Hedgepath was. Absolutely no clue. I didn't even know there was a Queen's University of Charlotte, frankly. Okay, I had absolutely no idea. And then they played his highlight tape on the draft.
Yeah, that's
and
what
I watched this guy on the wing step 3 people and run 60 meters. Okay, and then get tackled. And I thought, oh, this guy's a prop. This guy is not a prop. This guy is a back at heart who just happened to get huge. That's what happened. And look, Rugby New York is going to have a time with this guy.
Right,
I am telling you that this guy, and something that will get you in starting lineups in the MLR, as long as you have the base talent, is having a certain trait or a certain skill that is just almost you can't turn it down. And having a prop with that type of footwork, with that type of ability to run with the ball, it's just, big. And the Rugby New York prop room really isn't that deep, right? You got Wangluski with his long hair, and you got Mayhew, who's out in New Zealand right now. But yeah, I can see him fitting in, and it's surprising, but on a really good team. And I know we said that guys going to good teams really won't get the opportunity, but this is one of those where I think, hey, if this guy is developed right, has the right scrummaging, has the right base skills in addition to that footwork and speed, he can be a real threat.
Yeah, absolutely. Fitz, you agree with that?
I'm not saying that Doyle Hedgepeth's DH is going to be the next great big American sports star in New York City like Aaron Judge, but he may be.
I would love to see that.
You guys heard it here first on the Fantasy Ruckers. I'm so excited to watch this guy play at the Major League Rugby level. Just strap in, because he's going to either run you over, he's going to step you, he's going to do it in New York City.
Look, I don't want to. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine being a defender and being scared of all of those things. You know, usually you're scared of one, but now I have to be worried about all three different things. He might truck me, he might bosh me, he might step me, he might dummy me. That's way too many things to think about, and that is, you know, I might have to hop on that bandwagon. Fitz.
Yeah, the appropriate call is your man. That's the call on defense.
Yes,
your man.
It's the appropriate call is substitution, please. So.
And I will say, as we wrap up this first round, is that I think what just complements it so well, and why I think out of all the picks that were selected in the first round, really excited to see what Hedgepeth does, is the way that Rugby New York utilizes their forwards, and I think it really complements his game. Rugby New York was dominating at times at possession. They were really using that front pack, really rolling through that, gaining the tough meters and really grinding it out. And I think if you have a guy like Hedgepeth that can add to that, and he can be part of that kind of dominating force, it's going to be pretty ridiculous to see. And you definitely won't have a shortage of opportunities with the ball, I think, is the biggest point here, which may translate to some sort of fantasy impact here, which we don't usually see from a prop position. But hey, maybe Hedgepeth can be one of those guys that is kind of the anomaly when it comes to props. So we went through the whole first round of, some nice little nuggets there about the impact that some of these guys are going to have when it comes to fantasy rugby. And just remember, this is all through the lens of fantasy rugby, completely different on, the talent levels of their actual skills on the pitch. Hopefully we're trying to, as we add more stats that I mentioned that we're going to talk about shortly here, we get closer to kind of, mirroring those same things where good players in actual rugby mirrors good players in fantasy rugby. We're slowly getting there. We're getting closer and closer. But to close out the show here, guys, got two more things to get over here. Yeah, since we have the what seems to be the college rugby guru, John Fitzpatrick, on our show, according to how, what is it, 10% or 20% hit rate on his mock draft. I think that's the highest among them, definitely what Matt or myself would have gotten. But I'm going to do a lightning round with you guys here about just quick off the top questions here. First name that comes to mind, you let me know what you think of. We'll start with here first, and I think this is the easiest to answer out of them all. Out of all the players that were selected, first round, second round, third round, who is the most talented player? I feel like this is a lob up for you guys.
Well, we're all saying Gala, right? That's what we're supposed to say, because he was a clear-cut first pick and the only guy that I knew before the draft.
Right. I think that's the clear cut. Pretty quick, pretty lightning. We're getting easy here first, right? Fitzy,
I'm gonna go Gabe Kettering, but that doesn't count because he's not playing this year. And I like Gala, but I'm gonna go with Calixto Martinez, of course.
Oh, see, this is why we got Fitzy on here. To bring the good stuff.
One. And I will say, before we move on to the next lightning round question, Fitzy, I should have asked this to you before. Were there any guys, I guess, outside the first round that people need to be aware of in terms of names that could possibly jump in there in terms of fantasy impact, or guys to look out for in this upcoming MLR season that's going to be fun to watch?
Yeah, Dallas in the second round with the 11th pick. They drafted the guy whose last name I'm not even going to try and pronounce because I'm going to butcher it, but Mazvita from Arkansas State, big center. He's big, he's fast. I think he's got an opportunity. He's going to get on the field, and he's going to, I think, make some noise. Be on the lookout for him. He might be a late round flyer.
Naimar Rebvu. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
You can all say it three different ways, and we'll all be wrong. I think that's how it usually goes.
Yeah. And talk about opportunity too, right? That's a whole lot of opportunity right there. I mean, you can step in and really dominate there. Any other guys that you're looking out for?
I think Jack Manzo. I think the hooker in Old Glory DC, right? If he's a starter, in a way you can probably get some tries off the back of them all from a lineout. I think he's another guy to take a look at. Another guy who I like, who's also on Dallas and could just be opportunity, and I think that's that Argentinian connection. That's why he got drafted. But Matthias Karamudi from Thomas More. Apparently he's got some good skills. He might be another one to watch out for. Is he going to be a starter At fly half coming in as a drafted rookie, most likely probably not. But hey, in Dallas, you never know. You know, you walk the wrong way, and who knows?
We'll definitely see. I know you had a lot of those guys up high there, so we'll see whether or not Fitzy, you should be the one drafting for this teams. Maybe you're getting it all right. All right, back to the quick lightning round. The next one is going to be best situation. Out of all the players that were drafted in here, who is in the best situation to make the most fantasy impact come the 2023 year?
Wow, Fitzy, you go first.
Maybe Sebastian Velani.
Okay.
Nola Gold moved up to grab him at number 2.
Sure.
I mean, you're not going to sit him on the bench. You're going to give him an opportunity to play. There must be something in him that they really like. So sure. I'm going to go him.
I'm going to go, Matt, as you're thinking here. I am going to roll the dice here, and I'm going to have confidence that Seth Purdy is going to play the center position, and he's going to hop in there, and if he is able to start with the Rugby Atlanta, who is a strong side we've seen. We know how good that Rugby Atlanta front pack is. If you can complement that with a strong back line, which I'm thinking would be a pairing of both I'm pulling it up here, of Will Leonard and Seth Purdy. That sounds pretty good to me. So I think he might have the best situation, just thinking about the team that he's on and that kind of, I guess, lack of depth they have at that center position right now.
I'm going to bring it back to Shane Barry. I know we talked about him and his situation, and I don't recall. I recall Alatimu playing full 80 almost like most of the time, almost every game, right? So they really needed a guy to come in and be able to be that staple backup 10. I know they had Kieran Joyce, but Kieran Joyce also came in at center as well. So I think that's a good position for them.
And then last lightning round question here, guys. A sleeper, and Fitz, you'll probably have a nice little bet here. The whole family's making the appearances here, Fitz. It's all good. We're all in on the Fantasy Ruckers. Your sleeper pick for this year. Who's a guy that maybe their name is not, people don't know their name, maybe weren't as familiar with them within this MLR draft? Who is the guy that may be surprising people and ending up making an impact next season?
I'll go 2 names. Evan Conlon, another scrum half drafted by Rugby ATL. I think he was probably the out of Lindenwood top-rated scrum half. You know, I think he might have an opportunity down there to challenge Ryan Reese for some minutes. It seems like Rugby ATL is willing to take a chance on some young backs. I think he's got an opportunity down there to crack and put up some numbers. The other name, and this is a similar situation to Shane Barry, but a fly half that Old Glory DC drafted in Mike Ware out of Dartmouth. I think he was probably like the quote-unquote top American fly half coming out of college. He finds himself in an interesting situation, right? Like, we know that Old Glory DC has a very strong fly half. Is he going to be there next year? We also know that Mike Davulis, I probably butchered his name, but he was their fly half fullback who tore his ACL, I think, halfway through the season, but he's capped by the Eagles. You know, will he be ready for the start of the 23 season? Don't know, but you know, good situation, could be a sleeper opportunity for Mike Ware, maybe a fly half to, you know, kind of just put his name out there and say, hey, you know what, I want to challenge and be the starting fly half for Old Glory DC. Is that going to happen round 1? Most likely not. But hey, another name to keep an eye on as a sleeper, because he could have an opportunity at some point step in. So we'll see.
For sure. And the name that I'm going to go with here before I toss the mat here, I know, Fitzy, you mentioned Jack Manzo. I think he was by most people the consensus best hooker coming into this draft. But the name that I'm actually going to go with is a guy that was competing for that title, was Kakoi Nelligan, going to the San Diego Legion. The reason why I choose him, he is pretty dang good. He may not have been considered the best in this draft, coming from Army West Point, obviously having that title winning season with Army West Point there. The reason why I pick him is not that I think that he's going, his name's pretty cool. But not that I think that he is going to overtake that starting position in San Diego at that hooker spot, because they do have Pete Malcolm, who finished the 5th front rower on the season, 37.2 total fantasy points. But there is a space there to be that backup guy, because we know that hookers often don't last that full 80 minutes. A lot of the times they are subbing that front row out. If Kokoi Nelligan ends up being that guy that's coming in at the 60th minute, he's not getting that 70th minute bonus point, but hey, he might be part of some of those mauls in a pretty stout San Diego Legion pack that has shown to rely on that set piece in certain games. And if Kokoi Nelligan can be that guy that they go to in those opportunities late in matches, it could pay off for fantasy owners. Matt, to round off the quick segment here, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with a guy that Fitzy mentioned earlier, is Karamuti. And simply, and Fitzy also said is simply because of situation of this guy got taken in the 2nd round. He's, I think, one of the 2 fly halves that the Jackals picked up. So clearly they're looking for something, and they're just trying to see what they can get out of those guys that they drafted. So I think he's going to have a good situation. It might be a sleeper that we might have to watch for. It might be starting by the end of the season for the Jackals.
For sure. Okay, and now this is the way we're going to close out the show here, Fitzy. I'm not going to take too much of your time much longer here. We're going to lock in our top 5 fantasy predictions, and we're gonna go back, right? We're putting this into stone here, and we're gonna go back at the end of the 2023 year, and we're gonna see, barring, I'll allow changes to be made, and we'll announce them on social media and stuff. Not at the end of the year, Matt. That's not how this thing works. If we were able to do that, you'd be winning every single fantasy season. But we'll be able to make changes leading up to the 2023. But as of right now, drop down your top 5 fantasy rookie predictions. For me, I'm gonna go here. I'll put myself on the spot first. I got to go with the talent Sam Gola and the opportunity he has in Dallas. I think if he does sit at that back row position and he's as good as people say he is, and he's able to handle the ball, I got to go with that top guy. Got to go with the guy that I said is in the best situation. I talked about it in our Ask TFR show, question at the top of the show, situation. And if Seth Purdy is put into that center starting position role right off the gate, that is obviously a big if, but if he does, he joins a very, very stout Rugby Atlanta team that has the potential to be very, very deadly in this next year. Go with Sebastian Velani at the number 3 spot, Ethan Hager at number 4, again with that Dallas Jackals opportunity, and then I'll round it off by Doyle Hedgepeth, because we just enamored over him for the past 5 minutes here when we were talking about him, because he should be pretty good for Rugby New York. So that'd be my top 5 that I'm locking in. Fitzy, why don't we go with you?
Yeah, sure. No particular order, or am I just going 5 names here?
All right.
Go 5 names. Go any 5 names.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to be too dissimilar, Ryan, from what you said, but I do think Seth Purdy's got a good opportunity to make a fantasy impact. So he's definitely one name that I would throw out there for sure. I also like, who I talked about earlier, but Masvita, the center for Dallas. I think he's going to find himself in a good opportunity to make an impact and get on the field. I like Ethan Hager, right? The wing from Dallas. I think he's got an opportunity there. So that's 3. I like Jack Manzo, the hooker from Old Glory, DC. That's 4. So you need 1 more from me. And I'm going to go with also Sebastiano Velani.
That's what I thought you were going with.
You
can't leave your sleeper out of there. You got to keep your sleeper in. Exactly.
And of course, overall, he's going to see the field.
Of course, you're going to throw in your DC guy in there as well. Maddie, to close this draft portion out, what you got here?
Yeah,
on the line.
Obviously the first one is going to be Sam Gola.
Okay.
Sam Gola. I obviously got to go him first. The next guy I'm going to go is Shane Barry. I'm going to have him as the second best guy. The third guy, I'm going to go with, I'll go with Doyle Hedgepeth just because
you're all aboard the Hedgepeth train, aren't you? You're on the Hedgepeth.
Yeah. Hey, that's what's going on. And then, I got to agree. Ethan Hager, I think in Dallas will definitely get some opportunity. The fact that he was their first of a few wingers off the board and a first of a few backs off the board, I think that's got to say something in their belief and they're willing to play him. And then, the last guy I'll go is Velani just because I don't know what's going on with Stevens. So, if he does end up getting that big time playing time, who knows? Who knows what can happen with that?
Absolutely. All right. Well, though that's for you listeners out there. You can mark it down. We've locked in our top 5 rookies for next season. We'll see how wrong we are when it comes to next year. Because I'm sure there's going to be no one in those top 5s that will be seen next year. There's going to be some random name that we see, but who knows? That's why we love rugby, and that's why we love fantasy rugby in particular. It's absolutely great. Doesn't always work like that cut and dry black and white usually. So yeah. Hey, Fitzy, appreciate you coming on, man. I know it was a little bit of a longer episode here, but do appreciate your insight. Love the stuff that you're doing at Rugby Morning. For the people that are listening and for the people that are watching on YouTube, why don't you just give a quick plug in here on how people can follow you, what Rugby Morning does, and ultimately how they can subscribe to that amazing daily email that you do that is so key to keeping on top of not only the latest in the MLR world, but just rugby as a whole. It's a nice little way to package everything in a nice little email in the morning to drink your coffee to every day.
Well, I think you already said it. I mean, I think that was it right there. That was the intro right there, Ryan. So yeah, just follow us at Rugby Morning, and we do fantasy stuff. So for sure.
It's great. Yeah, at Rugby Morning on Instagram, at Rugby Morning on Twitter. That's where you get a lot of your stuff. And then go to rugbymorning.com, and that's where you can subscribe to that amazing email. Well, Fitzy, really appreciate your insight, man. Maybe that was a nice little think test for you to kind of work out how you can expect the next fantasy season to go in preparation for that. Appreciate your insight, man. I love the work that you're doing out there, and I hope people appreciate it as much as we do here at the Fantasy Ruckers.
Well, yeah, likewise, Ryan, Maddie, good seeing you guys. Keep up the good work. Keep getting that fantasy stuff out. I'm looking forward to this teaser that you're going to drop.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you listen to the rest of the episode because there is some exciting news coming. But Fitzy, until then, I'm sure we'll talk to you soon. We'll love to have you on again. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon to break down some of this stuff and continue our journey as a whole collective Fantasy Ruckers League to grow this thing. And hey, maybe soon your name will be on here as part of our Fantasy Ruckers League. That's the entire goal.
I mean, I know I saw your son with the baseball bat, but make sure you take some time to get a rugby ball in those hands as well.
Oh, he's got one. Yeah, easy too. Oh yeah. They play on the touch.
There we go. Great. I at some point we might have enough people to put together a Fantasy Ruckers 15s team, and we can have a nice yearly tournament. We'll play touch, Matt. It'll be touch. But nonetheless, Fitzy, thanks again, man, and we'll talk to you soon, dude.
Good stuff. Thanks, Seth. See ya.
Yeah, that was John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning. Really appreciate all the stuff that he does. And again, make sure you do follow at Rugby Morning. It's great stuff on Twitter. He did the draft preview or draft live show last night with College Rugby Wrap Up. And just awesome stuff. So if you're itching and craving for more rugby content, that is definitely one way to do it. Of course, in addition to the Fantasy Ruckers. So before we close out the show, though, that was a great draft breakdown. I think I know a little bit more, definitely about these American rookies that are coming into the league because of Fitzy and stuff. Matt, I hope you used your sticky notes there to take as much notes as you can.
I used them all. I have to actually get a new pack now. So.
Oh wow!
I used all those notes now. I gotta get a new pack. Basically, I'm drafting all of them.
John would be proud.
Yeah, I'm making my way up. Maybe I'll be 7th this year. Who knows?
Maybe. Who knows? But yeah, I guess people are still listening to this show because they want to hear what I was teasing at the top.
I was going to say it'd be pretty criminal for you to just walk off and say that's it.
Yeah,
sorry,
tune in
no
next episode. We'll get to it. Very exciting news for us at the Fantasy Ruckers here. Not so much. I can't really say much about things that are be happening in the future. And for future leagues, we're still trying to work this out. We're still trying to grow this to more people. We're still trying to implement deeper and more in-depth stats to make fantasy rugby in the MLR more dynamic and closer, like we mentioned, to the actual game itself, where guys who are excelling in fantasy rugby are also the ones that are at the top of the game in the MLR. But with that being said, I have been able to get access to the 2022 MLR in-depth stats that has a whole wide range of numbers and in-depth things. So maybe not close to getting them for the 2023 year, but at least we can start having a conversation about what those stats may look like and the impact they may have in the world of fantasy rugby. We're going to break it all down. I've got tackles. I've got minutes played. Yeah. I've got pass accuracy. I got kicking accuracy. I got all of the above. Anything that you can think of, I have the numbers from the 2022 year. We're going to break it all down. We're going to try to figure out what rules would best apply to that, how we're going to work that all out, what would tackles be valued at, what would pass accuracy be valued at if we wanted to include that. And then we're going to break it down and see how that affects the 2022 rankings and if that's something that fantasy managers want to see.
That just makes me itching for more conversation this offseason. So much more to talk about, so much more what ifs, so much more, new rankings. I'm stoked. That'll be awesome conversation to get us through this, lull of an offseason now that the draft is done.
Yeah, I'm just going through the spreadsheet right now. I have minutes played down to the second.
Yes.
that's how in depth we're going. We got all the numbers now.
If you play 70 minutes and 32 seconds and you get 1.5 points. If you play 70 minutes and 31 seconds, 0. You get none.
No points for you.
No points for you. But that is exciting. And you know what? On top of that excitement, on top of the new stats, we're gonna try and get some of the boys on here as well. Some of those boys that you just saw in the top 10. We might be able to get some of those boys on to talk about how excited they are and how they feel about being now draft eligible for not just the MLR draft, but also the Fantasy Ruckers Show Fantasy League draft. So, hey,
we might have a say in this. These guys, if we tell them that they're playing for the Fantasy Ruckers League and that's what really matters, hey, maybe we can make some fantasy stars out of these guys because they're going to have that much more motivation. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's why Ko had such a good season, right? Because we told him that he was playing for fantasy rugby now. He had to score the points. Fitzy drafted him. You got to get in there, and he had a really good season. So I think there's something to be said about. I think it was more so
he was disrespected by when he was drafted. But yeah, it was because of
that could be. That could definitely be it too. But we'll see whether or not we can get some of those guys on. And yeah, lots and lots of numbers to break down. All of that is going to come to you throughout episodes, throughout the entire rest of this off season, and we're going to see how we can try to incorporate that. And yes, get to that ultimate goal of getting these stats into the 2023 year. We're still trying to work that out. We are going to let you guys know, all the listeners, and especially our Fantasy Ruckers League members, if that is a thing that is able to happen. But until then, we can at least imagine a world with those numbers and see how that affects the 2022 year. I'm really interested to see whether or not how much of an impact it has. I will say, I guess to close out the show, Matt, do you think Bodine Walk is still at the top there once we incorporate all the stats? I'm going to say yes, because he just had that big of a dominant season. But hey, who knows?
No, maybe Mike Smith makes his way to the top by leading the league in tackles. You never know.
I guess you never know.
Hey, I guess you got to find out next episode on the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Wow, you know what? You did my job. That does it. For Matt Yee, for Ryan Yee, for Fitzy, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, we'll be back next week. Why do you even need me?
Sponsored by Gilly's Beer.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.